Hello, this is part 3 of Genesis Revisited. It continues with the 5th day of creation. This is the creation of life in the waters, and notice that it's waters, not seas. So that could include seas, but also rivers, lakes, ponds, types of fresh water, and it also includes birds, not just water creatures. And birds would include other types of flying creatures like insects. The English translation uses the word moving for some of the creatures, and that is for the original Hebrew sharetz, which has more the meaning of swarming. And swarming would point to types of creatures that can move in groups. That could be insects, fish, other types of creatures that move in large groups. The flying creatures can move in the open firmament of heaven according to the English translation. The word for open in Hebrew is pane or panim, but that means actually a surface or face. So it really means that the flying creatures can fly up to the surface of heaven. That would be the underside of heaven, the undersurface. The English translation often uses the word whale for the original Hebrew, which is tanim or tan, and that could include whales, but it also could be dragons, serpents, sea snakes. There are 3 important things you might notice about the sea creatures. One is that there's no mention at all that they're male and female. And the second is that they're only created. They're not formed or made as man and the beast later. And also, God speaks directly to them. It appears that He's speaking to them when He tells them to be fruitful and multiply. If God speaks to the water creatures, that could very well mean that they can speak also. If they can understand Him, then they probably have the ability to speak. Now, the 6th day of creation, God makes the beasts of the earth and mankind, and the Bible says that He makes the beasts, and this would include reptiles that walk on land, creatures that go on all fours. It would also include cattle, horses, and it also does include mankind. And notice that it doesn't say anything about whether the beasts are male and female. And also the Bible uses the word make, which is also used for the sun and moon. So notice that connection there. And just a side note, the name for Esau is the same word as the name for make. And that means something that is rough, cut out. And it's funny that Esau was known as a kind of a beastly man. It said he was hairy and he liked being out in the field in the open better than being inside. Then God says that He's going to make mankind, but shortly after that it says that He creates mankind. And the word for create is different from the word for make. And also, this is the first time we see God creating male and female. There's no mention of the water creatures or the beasts or the cattle being male and female. It's only with mankind. And they're also created plural, male and female. But notice that it appears that only the males are created in the image of God and not the females, because the words he and him are used referring to the image. Now there's some interesting things in the next verses after this. We're told that mankind is given dominion over all the creatures of the earth and also in the waters. And there's also a command on what they can eat. And we assume that certain things are prohibited by what they're told they can eat. They're told they can eat fruits, seeds, and herbs. And the beasts are told that they can eat leaves. And we assume meat is prohibited. And we also assume that this is told to mankind. It's possible the beasts were told directly, but it doesn't say that clearly. And also the fish appear to be able to eat anything. They're not told, or we're not told what they can eat. So we assume they can eat meat and plants, anything like that. And we would assume also that roots are prohibited. And I would guess that this has to do with the maintaining of the earth. If you eat roots, that could cause deserts. By eating just the leaves, you're not destroying the whole plant, but if you eat the root, you're going to destroy the whole plant. And also eating meat is destructive, so there could be a way to save the earth in these commands. And the command in the first chapter is similar to the command in the second chapter The big difference is that there's no consequence in the first chapter. God just says what can be eaten, but he doesn't say what the consequence is. But in the second chapter, God says that death is the consequence of eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now you might ask just what dominion means when mankind is given dominion over the water creatures and creatures of the earth. You could think that it's like a farmer having some kind of rule over the beasts, over his cattle, his flocks. But you might say that it's actually deeper than that. It could actually even mean possession. That's like being able to control a creature, like some kind of demonic possession or something like that. It doesn't really say, and you don't really hear much about it. The only person I've ever heard speak about that is Benny Hinn. Now, I don't accept all his teachings, and I think he's actually a false teacher, but there is some truth in the things he said. And he said that the dominion that was given to mankind in the beginning was actually the ability to live inside a creature, to possess it, and you could actually experience whatever that creature experiences. So if it's like, say, an eagle, you could go inside that eagle and experience flight and better vision like the eagle has. Or with a horse, you could experience what it's like to run fast on the ground, things like that. So adds a whole new picture of just what that dominion was. And they could also go inside say a fish and see what it's like to go underwater. And so you have to think of it, it could have been possibly that way. And with the command on what to eat, it implies a form of death. You figure if you can violate the commands on what can be eaten, you would actually have death. So say like with meat, if you eat meat, that means you're killing the animal that you're eating. And if you eat a plant, you're actually killing it. You could eat maybe the leaves, and that doesn't kill the plant if you eat some of the leaves. But if you eat the roots and all the fruit and leaves off of it, then you're going to actually kill it. So there is a type of death implied in these commands, but mankind doesn't yet know about death, or at least they might understand physical death if they're violating these commands, but not a full spiritual death, or they can't predict death. And I would say that there was a possibility that mankind could lose its dominion over the creatures by violating the commands of God. So if, say, you killed an animal and ate it, you would lose your ability to possess that animal. And actually the reverse might happen. The essence of that animal might possess you. So it'd be like a curse. If you ate some creature, you'd be cursed by being bonded somehow with that creature. You couldn't get away from it anymore. And you might end up being trapped inside that creature or the other creatures that are the same type of creature. So it may be that the first human beings were somewhat different than human beings today. They possibly had the ability to actually possess an animal, and that would mean they could go inside it. And also with the sexes, they may have had the ability to either change sexes or to experience being inside another sex, actually seeing what it's like from their perspective. And they may have even had the ability to be invisible, to not appear at all. And it may be that they lost their dominion that they had by violating God's commands. So say if you killed an animal and ate it, you might lose your dominion by doing that. And it's possible that because of the way they were created and not being formed or made, they could be actually possessed by an animal, or the spirit of that animal that they had killed when they ate it. And they would lose their dominion. They would not be able to possess an animal anymore, and they actually themselves would be possessed by the spirit of an animal. So the whole situation is being reversed, and they also might lose their ability to go inside another sex and experience from that other sex's perspective. And it is interesting that human beings today, we do have an enzyme that breaks down DNA from other creatures in the diet, and that's called nuclease. It's an enzyme that breaks down substances that are eaten, the DNA substance of a plant or an animal. And it's possible these early humans didn't have that, and that affected them. And we don't have the problem now with breaking down DNA, but that could be what caused them to lose their dominion and actually change their structure. And you can see a death implied in what they were doing if they violated God's command. We see death entering and a corruption entering into mankind. And I can go into that later in other sections, but I'll go ahead and end this section now, and then I'll just continue with the Garden of Eden and the man formed and put into the Garden of Eden, and how you can see differences between him and the other humans. And so I will start up again next time.